This is where we left off with the pond and stream the last time, with only one bridge set in place. As you remember, I wasn't 100% satisfied with the final shape of the pond, or the stream for that matter of fact, and I really can't fix that because it's set in place. So maybe I can add to it when I add the second and third bridges. First thing to do is to get the dock and fishing boat up, as well as remove all the ripples. Luckily, the gloss Mod Podge I used to put the ripples in place pulled right up from the epoxy surface. After carefully measuring and marking the location of the long truss bridge, including how far below the grade the bridge shoes needed to reach, I started removing pink foam insulation. There was a little bit of plaster on the west side that needed to be cut through, but all in all the foam came off pretty cleanly. And I debated about cutting the west side down as well, all the way to the water line and maybe widening it out. But in the end I just opted to widen the cut out a little bit, as I wanted to add more epoxy to the pond and stream, and if I cut to the water line, I wouldn't be able to do that. After several test fits and adjustments, I carved a slope on the eastern side. I built up the rock facing, the same as I did last time, using Sculpt-A-Mold, and the painting was exactly the same before. Gray and black inks and dark blue acrylic paints mixed together to kind of give that grayish blue look, followed up by black and sepia inks. On the eastern bank, I left a little section flat, and I'm planning to make that an access road for the railroad workers. So that got a coat of brown paint. After everything dried, it was time for some PVA glue and tile grout. Once that was set, I put the plastic dam back in place and poured more epoxy to raise the water level. And so after the epoxy was completely cured, I gave it a full week. The gloss Mod Podge was applied again to anchor the dock and the boat, as well as add some ripples back to the flat surface. And while all that cured, I thought about that eastern side of the abutment and how it steeply drops off to make the road cut in place. And it got me to thinking about maybe doing a little scratch building of some railroad tie retaining walls. Grabbing some 40 mil square plastic evergreen rods, I started cutting little bits to length. The idea was to have every other row rest on a tie that was perpendicular to the wall, like embedded reinforcement posts sunk back into the wall. The plastic rods were glued together with thin cement, painted a dark brown color. Some acrylic gel was mixed with some dark brown pigment powders. And this was pushed in the spaces between the railroad ties to kind of fill the gap. And once it cured, these were pushed into place using some texture effects paints as a glue and to also backfill the dirt and stone texture. These 40 by 40 mil square rods represent about 6.5 inches in scale dimensions. So it's really hard to put that texture in and actually see it. Anyhow, I doubt anyone casually will note the detail, but I know it's there, and that's what counts, right? So while I had the evergreen plastic out, I also built a raised deck for the fishing dock to be anchored onto. Again, I went back to my 40 mil square rod, and I also had some flat stock that was, I think it was 60 mils wide and like a 10 mils thick. So that was the planking. So here is a drone-like flyover of the new stream and pond. Now it's time to set up some trains and run them to see if the track still holds continuity before we come back and completely try and scenic this side of the layout and get some roads put in and get that covered bridge put in place. And until next time, happy railroading.